Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Wellbe podcast. This podcast is designed to help you learn, expand what you thought was possible, and become as empowered as you can be in your health. Thanks for tuning back in for the 7th season of the Wellbe podcast. I hope you've been enjoying our first few interviews, investigative guides, and our latest Wellbe wrap-up so far this season. 2 very important announcements this week. The first is that, if you don't already know, I am a board-certified holistic patient advocate, and I work with a few select private clients in addition to my online programs and running my non-toxic product database, etc. I have decided to close my fall roster of private clients on Thursday, September 22nd. So depending on when you listen to this, that date may have already passed. But if it hasn't already and you might be interested or are curious whether working with me as your holistic patient advocate might be helpful, you can schedule a free discovery call with me. So head to getwellbe.com and you can see how to set that call up. And the second announcement is that if you are a health professional or a health coach, the Wellbe Patient Advocacy and Navigation Program, specifically for health coaches and other kinds of health professionals, has 8, continuing education credits and is generally incredibly helpful in expanding knowledge on this topic, is on sale in honor of Back to School. And you can use the code Back to School to purchase the program for $100 off until the end of September. So again, depending on when you listen to this, this date may have already passed, but if it hasn't, head to getwellbe.com so that you can get that savings and you can take the program for as long as you need to. So you can purchase the program in September, even if you can't start the program until a few weeks after that. Today's episode is an in-depth guide to fat, the differences between unhealthy and healthy kinds of fat, and most importantly, what to cook with, and what kinds of fat and oil are in the food that you buy. If you're over 30 years old, you likely remember the low-fat craze of the 1990s. Fats were vilified, and consumers snapped up fat-free and low-fat products, which, by the way, were chock full of sugar, processed ingredients, and chemicals. It was actually a deliberate campaign by the sugar lobby and the sugar industry to point the finger at somebody else, and most notably the fat industry, and it went remarkably well for them. But in recent years, we've come to learn that fats aren't evil. In fact, they're essential to healthy function of our bodies. The important thing is to eat the right types of fat, which can be a bit confusing to figure out. Real quick before we jump in, unless you're driving, of course, then don't do this. But otherwise, if you're holding your phone and haven't yet left the Wellbe podcast a review, please do so now. It takes less than a minute, and if you're getting anything out of the Wellbe podcast, this is your way to tell me. So thank you for that review in advance, and now let's dive in on fat. First off, it's important to understand how vital fat is to your health. Your body needs dietary fat to absorb fat-soluble vitamins and minerals, such as vitamins A, D, E, and K, but also to build cell membranes and allow your blood to clot. Fats are also an important and efficient form of energy, as each gram contains 9 calories as compared to the 4 calories found in each gram of carbohydrate or protein. Dietary fat, which is not to be confused with the fat humans carry on their bodies, can be found in both plant-based and animal-based foods. Every fat-containing food is comprised of a mixture of different fatty acids, and which fatty acids are most predominant will shape whether they are healthy or unhealthy fats. At the highest level, fats are divided into 2 categories, saturated and unsaturated fats. Saturated fats are generally considered to be unhealthy, whereas unsaturated are considered to be healthy. It's more complicated than that, but that's generally what people think. The difference between saturated and unsaturated fats lies in their chemical structure. So let's nerd out on this for a second. All fats are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen molecules, but saturated fats are quote-unquote saturated with hydrogen atoms, meaning they have the highest number of hydrogen atoms possible and no double bonds in their chemical structure. Saturated fats are solid at room temperature, so think butter, and unsaturated fats, on the other hand, are not fully saturated with hydrogen atoms and contain 1 or more double bonds. They are liquid at room temperature, so olive oil, for example. These differences in chemical structure might not mean a lot to non-scientists, but they can make a big difference to your body. Because saturated fatty acid chains have no gaps, they can pack together very tightly, which can clog arteries, which is a major risk factor for heart attack and stroke, and raise LDL, which is bad cholesterol, when they enter the bloodstream. Unsaturated fats do not have this effect. Another thing that separates healthy fats from unhealthy fats is their ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids. This is a very important thing. Both omega-3 and omega-6 are polyunsaturated fats, aka healthy, or so we think. But we've recently learned that the ratio between the two matters a lot. Today, people are consuming way more omega-6 fatty acids than in previous generations, largely because omega-6 levels are so high in many common cooking oils and because most processed and packaged foods are made with these omega-6 containing oils. At the same time, omega-3 consumption has dropped significantly, and our bodies haven't had enough time to genetically adapt to this new balance. To give you a sense of how recently this ratio has changed in our diets, the NIH explained that up until about 100 years ago, the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio has been around 4-to-1 or less, meaning or 3-to-1. Today, the typical Western diet now provides an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of approximately 20-to-1 in favor of omega-6s. This has distorted the ratio of these fatty acids in our body, which matters because omega-6s are pro-inflammatory, while omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. The current ratio in a typical American diet perpetuates chronic low-grade inflammation, and given that chronic inflammation is an underlying cause of many diseases, this is a big deal for your health, and this may be the light bulb for you as to why a poor diet has so much of an impact on whether or not you get a chronic disease. A lot of it is this omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Now that we know what makes a fat healthy or unhealthy, let's get into some specific examples of which ones are healthy and unhealthy. As I just mentioned, every fat is either saturated or unsaturated, with the former being considered unhealthy and the latter healthy, but as I said, it's much more nuanced than that. So here are some examples of unhealthy fats. Trans fats, the least healthy kind of fat, which is short for trans fatty acids. Trans fats are formed by turning liquid oils into solid fats via a process called hydrogenation. These fats can increase bad cholesterol while suppressing good cholesterol and contribute to chronic inflammation. Because they increase disease risk even when eaten in small quantities, the World Health Organization recommends that trans fats account for less than 1% of a person's daily calories. There are also naturally occurring trans fats, which occur in dairy and meat. These are less of a health concern, but only because Americans eat so many more artificial trans fats, since they're found in countless products. Artificial trans fats are found primarily in processed foods made with partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, including fried foods, baked goods, crackers, packaged snacks, margarine, and shortening. Food manufacturers are required to list trans fats on their nutrition labels, though they can circumvent this requirement if the product contains less than 0.5 grams per serving. So definitely look at the ingredient list for hydrogenated oils to be sure. Next, we have saturated fats. These are not as bad as trans fats, but should still be eaten sparingly in order to protect your heart health. Consuming too much saturated fat can increase bad cholesterol, and research shows that replacing saturated fat with polyunsaturated fat reduces the risk of heart disease. It's important to note that recent research has cast doubt into whether saturated fat is actually that bad as it relates to heart disease, but the general consensus is that eating too much of it is bad. For that reason, the American Heart Association still recommends that saturated fat account for no more than 5 to 6% of a person's daily calories. In my opinion, what's not being taken into account with this recommendation is that saturated fat in certain cuts of red meat and certain types of red meat, as well as certain kinds of butter and cheese, etc., has a role to play. So to blanket and say that all of these things are bad and should be avoided or should be kept to less than, 5 to 6% of your daily calories is not taking into account the nuance as well as the quality of these things, right? Because grass-fed beef we know has a lower fat content than factory farmed meat. So these things are all important to take into account. But just for simplicity's sake, saturated fats are primarily found in animal and dairy products such as red meat, butter, cheese, ice cream, dark poultry meat and skin, certain oils, and lard. So examples of healthy fats are monounsaturated ones. So these contain one double bond in their chemical structure and are typically liquid at room temperature, but solidify if refrigerated. They're a good source of vitamin E, an antioxidant that's often lacking in American diets. And research shows that eating a diet high in monounsaturated fats, such as the Mediterranean diet, is associated with better blood cholesterol levels and lower risk of heart disease. Examples of foods containing monounsaturated fats are olives, olive oil, avocados, nuts such as hazelnuts, almonds, Brazil nuts, and cashews, and then seeds such as sesame and pumpkin seeds, and certain vegetable oils, but we'll talk a lot more about that in a second. Next, we have polyunsaturated. So these fats contain two or more double bonds in their chemical structure. They're known as essential fats because your body can't make them on your own, meaning you need to get them from foods. The two types of polyunsaturated fats are omega-3s and omega-6. Much like monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fat can decrease your risk of heart disease by lowering levels of your LDL bad cholesterol. Polyunsaturated fats are found in fatty fish, so things like wild salmon, herring, sardines, trout, as well as walnuts, flax seeds, roasted soybeans, tofu, and some vegetable oils. So there's a lot of confusion over which cooking oils are healthy and unhealthy, at least in part because some oils that sound healthy simply aren't. I mean, wouldn't you think something that's a vegetable oil would by definition be healthy and not harmful? But that's not true. So when you consider the factors I just talked about, the balance between different types of healthy and unhealthy fat, as well as the omega-3 to 6 ratio, it becomes easier to decide what you should stock in your cupboard as far as cooking oils. We'll be right back with the healthiest and unhealthiest oils to cook with after this quick message. I don't know about you, but I never listen to the end of a podcast, so I'm hopping in here to let you know that the best way to stay empowered and on top of your health is to be in the WellBe community. So head to getwellbe.com/subscribe to make sure you're in like Flynn. On getwellbe.com, you'll learn about my private holistic patient advocacy work, my programs to help you go deeper and make life-altering changes to your health, and our awesome non-toxic product database. If you're more of a social media person, let's be friends on the gram. Find me at getwellbe. Don't forget that my private patient advocacy client roster is closing Thursday, September 22nd. If the date hasn't already passed, head to getwellbe.com to learn more about that and potentially schedule a free discovery call and see if it's a good fit for you. And if you're a health coach or other kind of health professional, make sure you get the $100 savings on the program that we run specifically for health coaches and other health professionals with 8 continuing education credits and lots of good stuff in there that will greatly expand your offering no matter what you're doing with patients or clients. And head to getwellbe.com to learn more about both. Okay, now back to which cooking oils to use. Oils tend to be high in polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats and are an important part of a healthy diet because they're a key source of essential fatty acids and vitamin E. However, the makeup of different fatty acids can vary greatly from oil to oil, so it's important to understand the breakdown before you make a choice. Generally, the best cooking oils contain more unsaturated fats, while the worst cooking oils contain more saturated fats. But unfortunately, it's really not that simple. So there are 3 other factors to consider when choosing healthy oils: the smoke point, the processing, and the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3s. The smoke point is the temperature at which an oil becomes so hot that it starts smoking. When an oil is heated past this point, the molecular structure of its fatty acids begin to degrade, producing potentially harmful free radicals. It also starts to taste bitter or burnt. free radicals can cause cellular damage that may lead to the development of disease, oils heated past their smoke point can also release a substance called acrolein, which can be dangerous to your lungs. So if you plan on using an oil to fry, sear, or saute something over high heat, make sure you check the smoke point. Otherwise, a healthy oil could turn unhealthy. Some oils are processed or refined while others are not. Highly refined oils tend to have a higher smoke point, which can be a good thing, and many are refined using chemical solvents, most commonly hexane. In one study of oils, 36 out of the 40 samples contain hexane residue, which has been linked to muscular weakness, headache, dizziness, giddiness, and slight nausea, among other negative health effects. However, you can also find refined oils that are cold pressed rather than treated with a chemical. Look for the term cold press or virgin to know that an oil was processed without chemical aid. Lastly, because many oils are so high in polyunsaturated fats, aka omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, you need to consider the ratio of these two, as I have talked about quite a bit on this episode. Having a high ratio can lead to chronic inflammation. All right, so now that we've looked at what makes an oil more or less healthy, let's look at what the worst offenders are. First, you have refined olive oil, also labeled as quote-unquote pure olive oil or light olive oil. This oil is a blend of extra virgin olive oil and processed oils. The processing makes the oil last longer and increases the smoke point, but it adds potentially harmful chemicals and removes nutrients. Next up, and this is a bit of a controversial one, is coconut oil. So coconut oil we did think was pretty healthy, and it is in certain ways, but it's actually higher in saturated fat and lower in unsaturated fat than most other oils. This high saturated fat content is why it's solid at room temperature. However, coconut oil has different health benefits than other high saturated, low unsaturated fat oils. For example, it has antimicrobial and antifungal properties due to its medium chain triglycerides, also known as MCT content. So there are many health professionals who still think it's worth using, but perhaps limiting how much you actually cook with it and using it topically, for example. Next, you have corn oil. While corn oil contains some healthy components like vitamin E, it has a very high ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, 46-1, so it's very inflammatory. Canola oil is high in heart-healthy monounsaturated fat, low in saturated fat, and has a high smoke point, which reduces the risk of degradation during cooking. On the flip side, it's highly processed using chemicals and has a high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Next, we have soybean oil. Not only does soybean oil have a high ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, it's also been linked to obesity, diabetes, autism, Alzheimer's, anxiety, and depression. Plus, its high levels of linoleic acid may be harmful for heart health because the acid is pro-inflammatory and can contribute to blood clots. Next up, we have palm oil. Palm oil has some redeeming health benefits. It's a good source of vitamin E and may improve brain health. However, some research ties it to impaired heart health. Plus, palm oil is incredibly damaging to the planet as palm plantations require the destruction of tropical forests and put endangered species at the risk of extinction. Now, here are some bad but not the worst oils for cooking. Peanut oil. Peanut oil has a very high smoke point, making it safe for high heat cooking, and is rich in vitamin E and low in saturated fats. The only sticking point here is the omega ratio. But if you can counter that by eating more omega-3s, it might be okay to use, but most people don't. If you are going to buy peanut oil, choose cold pressed or virgin peanut oil, but I think just to be on the safe side, avoid it for its bad omega ratio. Sapphire oil, made from the seeds of the sapphire plant. This oil is naturally non-GMO, so it's not genetically modified, along with containing healthy monounsaturated fats and vitamin E. One study showed that consuming safflower oil on a daily basis may improve inflammation, blood sugar management, and cholesterol. Still, it has a high content of omega-6s and a significantly lower content of omega-3s, so I say avoid. Next, we have sunflower oil. Sunflower oil has tons of vitamin E and high levels of oleic acid, which has been shown to increase good cholesterol and reduce inflammation. But again, as with all vegetable and seed-derived oils, the ratio of omegas is a big concern, so I say avoid. The best cooking oils to use, and what I use, are extra virgin olive oil, also known as EVU. Perhaps not surprisingly, the star of the Mediterranean diet is indeed a healthy oil, packed with monounsaturated fats, vitamin E, oleic acid, and antioxidants. EVU is not only heart healthy, but also linked to a lower risk of obesity, metabolic syndrome, and type 2 diabetes. The one caveat is that it has a low smoke point, so don't use it if you're cranking up the heat. It's great to use on salads, in dressings, or something that you're cooking on low heat. Next up, avocado oil. Avocado oil has a similar nutritional profile to extra virgin olive oil, with almost as much monounsaturated fat and plenty of vitamin E and oleic acid. It's been shown to help lower risk factors for heart disease like high cholesterol, as well as reduce joint inflammation, increase absorption of other nutrients, and protect cells against free radical damage. Plus, it has a relatively high smoke point, so it's fine to use when you're using high heat. Next up, we have sesame oil, which is high in unsaturated fats and contains the heart-healthy antioxidants sesamol and sesaminol, which may protect against the neurological consequences of certain diseases, including Parkinson's and others. Another study found that using sesame oil daily for 90 days improved fasting blood sugar in people with type 2 diabetes. Last, we have flaxseed oil. Because flaxseed oil is very high in omega-3 fatty acids, it's a great way to help out your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio if you consume other less healthy oils. However, its smoke point is quite low, so it's best not to use it for cooking. Instead, use it in salad dressings, dips, served with bread, etc. Besides which oil to get rid of at home and which ones to stock up on next time you're ordering oils online or grabbing them at the store, there's one other very important takeaway, which you should have already gotten, but I'll repeat it. One of the best ways to keep a good ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 foods in your diet and therefore keep down the inflammation in your body is to avoid food you don't cook yourself. Why? Because canola oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, and soybean oil are among the cheapest and worst oils for you. So they are used in most prepared foods, both packaged and processed foods that you might buy in the store, and then also takeout and restaurant food, which you might consume in a restaurant or a fast casual place if you're picking up a sandwich. If you're eating a lot of food in packages or frozen meals or food made in restaurants, you're going to be consuming a ton of omega-6 foods, and your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio will be high, which is not good. If you don't believe me, go in your pantry now and read off a few of the ingredient labels. You're probably going to see the oils I just mentioned, things like canola oil, sunflower oil, soybean oil, peanut oil, etc. This is a really, really important takeaway, so this is why I'm repeating it at the end of this episode. So that's it for now. I hope you have a better sense of why the oils you cook with and have on the food that you buy from outside your home have a major impact on your body, inflammation, and inevitably whether you get a chronic disease or a few. When people say to avoid processed foods, the high omega-6 oil content is one of the main reasons why, and it's not talked about enough. Head to getwellbe.com to read the written version of this guide with plenty of research links. And while you're there, become a Wellbe Insider so that you can get all of our latest content, special offers, and personal notes I don't share anywhere else weekly in your inbox. Plus, you'll get a free copy of my audio guide on how to feel the best you've ever felt and heal anything. The 10 things you need to optimize your health and heal any health issue, big or small, naturally. Even if you're the healthiest person out there, I promise you'll learn something you didn't know before that can optimize your health. Don't forget that my private patient advocacy client roster is closing Thursday, September 22nd. If the date hasn't already passed, Head to getwellbe.com to learn more about that and potentially schedule a free discovery call and see if it's a good fit for you. And if you're a health coach or other kind of health professional, make sure you get the $100 savings on the program that we run specifically for health coaches and other health professionals, with 8 continuing education credits and lots of good stuff in there that will greatly expand your offering no matter what you're doing with patients or clients. And head to getwellbe.com to learn more about both. If you haven't already and found this episode helpful or interesting, subscribe to the WellBe podcast. This way you'll never miss a new episode and they'll be delivered to you whenever we publish a new one. And please share this episode with family or friends who you think might find it valuable and informative. It means a lot and helps more people find the podcast. If you already have, then thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is your host, Adrienne Nolan-Smith, and thanks again for listening to the WellBe podcast.